Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais in Ontario, Canada, with episode number 66 of the Yakking Show. This is where we talk about life, business, and more. And we bring you tips and ideas for the changing world we're living in. And it's really changing right at this moment. As always, we have interesting guests on our show. Today is no exception. Going to be a very interesting show today. But it's my job to hand over to Kathleen. Before I do, though, you'd really help us if you'd hit the subscribe button under this video, because then you won't miss the next episode and our next exciting guest. Now I must welcome Kathleen. Hi, Kathleen. Good to see you back again. How are you today?
Hi, Peter. Great to see you too. And I'm doing great. Thank you. And thank you all so very much for tuning in to our show. We so appreciate you. We enjoy reading your comments, so please keep them coming. And if anyone out there is interested in becoming a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. And as Peter mentioned, we do have another special guest with us today. Her name is Valerie Forgeard, and she is coming to us from the United Kingdom. Welcome, Valerie. How are you today?
Hi, Kathleen. Hi, Peter. Thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure, really. You are the founder and director of Stunning Brand, and you also are the founder of World Citizen Artists. Can you please tell our audience more about your background and what led you into this career path?
Yeah, so like many people, I've got quite an unusual background, and where I am now is really not what I had planned. But it's been beyond expectations, which is great. I am from a small town, very small town in France, where I was the first Asian, I believe. So it was quite an experience to grow up in a small area, particularly in the 80s. It was a very different time. And I have been lucky enough to have an inheritance when I was 19, which I chose to use to go traveling rather than studying. So I don't, everything I do is, I'm entirely self-taught. And I've learned most things I know through traveling, working abroad. I went through my CV today and I realized that I had over 25 jobs.
Wow.
And I worked with probably over 100 nationalities in my lifetime. So I've been traveling for about more than 16 years and living abroad. So I had like a very rich life experience. However, when I find myself sometimes with other consultants to do what I'm doing, I realize that I'm not exactly the typical consultant. I have other ways of seeing things, but it works for me and for my clients. So that's
wow.
good enough.
Can you tell us about Stunning Brand and what it is exactly and how you started that?
Yeah, so I started Stunning Brand kind of accidentally. I didn't plan to be a brand consultant, but having traveling in many places and worked in many places, many people in the workplaces made me realize that I had a very broad view of looking at a company, looking at an organization, and I tend to see what I've seen somewhere else. I tend to see what's missing, what could be added that could help boosting brands. And I even had some employers who sent me to do coaching before to friends of theirs for their company. So then I realized, why not building a business and actually getting paid for it? And that's how I ended up to do this. And I really enjoy it. And what I really enjoy also is to help people feel like I'm being useful and bringing some insights of life experience and work experiences.
Wow. You say you worked in 16 different countries and with people from 100 nationalities. So did you have a base that you came back to between all those different jobs, or did you go from one country to the next and just keep on going?
Initially, I had a base, which was the UK and France. But there was one time I traveled for 4 years in a row. I just didn't go back at all. That was quite a long time.
Yes,
After
it
a
must
while,
be.
you kind of miss. Actually, coming from Europe, what I was missing after a while was the old buildings.
Yes.
Which is a strange thing, because when I was growing up, I didn't really, I actually, even when I was a kid, I was finding these old buildings quite boring. But when you're away for a long time, you realize that there are some things that are really become part of you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I found that living in Africa, where there were there were buildings, Europeans there from the late 1600s, but only in one small part. Where I lived in Rhodesia, the first Europeans went there, and the first buildings were in the late 1800s. So we were talking 100 odd years. I went to England and was looking at cathedrals that have been there for 500, 600, 1,000 years. And you really get that sense of history, don't you?
Yeah, you feel
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
What about it?
Actually, I just have to.
Yeah, carry on.
Kind of interesting, because just on that note, I remember traveling, like, I love Ireland and Scotland, and I was so drawn to it because of the rich history and in Ireland, you look through a field and you see ancient ruins just sitting there, and you can go up to the castles that are ancient and have been there for, as Peter said, 500-600 years. It's amazing. And I remember speaking with the locals and asking about, I just love your country because of that. And they said, oh, really? We're sort of drawn to North America because it's modern. So, I mean, right, to each his own, I suppose. Carry on, Peter, I'm sorry.
So one thing that I picked up from your website, Valerie, and I'm quoting from your website, you say your brand is the bridge between where you are now and where you want to be. So tell our listeners and viewers a little bit more about that.
Well, I tend to see a brand as a person. I don't see a brand as a brand. For me, a brand speaks, a brand makes you feel something. A brand can be happy, angry. So I tend to see it as a person. So it's like if you say to a child, your personality and your being is what will take you to where you are. So the way the choices you make is what will take you to the next stage. So many people think the brand is just the design, and then you do the marketing with the design. But if you take everybody's path, then you end up like everybody else.
Right.
And if you want to have a special brand, then you have to take some initiatives that are more creative, that are more adaptable as well, without changing especially the design or anything like this. But it could be like a lot of companies now take initiatives to get involved with diversity, for example. So they've understood now that the brand is not just about design, but it's about also the whole strategy and the personality of the brand.
Sure. So what you're aiming for is, when that brand is brought into someone's consciousness, be it audio, auditory, visual, sensational, tactile, the first feelings they get are positive.
Yeah.
So, for instance, in my experience, the first fast food chain I can remember in South Africa was Kentucky Fried Chicken. Whether it's good or bad for you is not the point at the moment. But whenever I heard that brand, I thought, wow, tasty chicken. And so it was a positive feeling. And then, of course, people said, well, you shouldn't be eating too much fried stuff. But that came later. But other brands that other people I think are iconic just leave me cold because I don't have that perception. So that's the art that you've got to put into it. Right, I'm with you.
You have to give it life to
give it life.
life.
Good. Yeah, that's a good one.
And switching gears a little bit, what motivated you to start the World Citizen Artists?
Well, actually, I wasn't aware of my branding capacity back then.
Right.
And actually, this is one of the things that made me aware that I was actually capable of building something from nothing. I was living in a 38 square meter apartment in Paris. And speaking about my organization as it is a global organization, and it became global eventually. But what motivated me is, so World Citizen Artist is an organization that promotes humanitarian issues and social issues through arts and music. And so there's two sides of me. One side is an artist. I'm very creative, and I've also exhibited paintings and before doing all of this. And I also had a very strong interest in humanitarian issues because during my travels, I went through civil war areas, for example. I volunteered in the garbage dump in Guatemala for an educational project. So I was very attached to try to help people on the ground. And when I went back to Europe, I felt really frustrated because I wasn't on the ground anymore. I couldn't help anyone. I mean, now I realize there's a lot of people that need help also in Europe. But when you're younger, you kind of see helping means being in the worst area in the world where people are really going through the extremes. And I just had this missing, and I still wanted to be part of it. And so when I tried to build an artistic career, I went to galleries in Paris. So I went back to Paris after this. It was about 15 years of traveling back then. And I went back to Paris, and my husband now told me that I should go to the galleries and see how it works. And I couldn't find any conversation about humanitarian issues and social issues, because my idea of the artistic world of Paris was the time of, you know, when Picasso, Modigliani, and all these artists were meeting up and talking about the issues in the world. But I didn't find this. That was in 2012, 2013. And then I went to the humanitarian and social organizations networks, and I couldn't find the artistic area. So I thought, if that world doesn't exist, I have to create it. And because I knew that art could have a strong impact on putting through a message, and that's how I came to it.
Okay. And are you still active in running that now?
Yes, very much. We restarted this year, but I'm starting now to delegate more and give more experience. So we've partnered with the Bristol Students' Union from the Bristol University, and we're recruiting a lot of students from there. So I'm trying to teach leadership to students and see if they can start to handle it a little bit more, to give more projects to the new generation, because after all, the art world will be theirs.
Yes. Oh, very good.
So Valerie, you've worked with some major consumer brands and also for nonprofit organizations. What are some of the key differences and some of the highlights?
Non-profit organizations, in the private sector, people sell something that's very straightforward. People want it or don't want it. A non-profit organization sells something that will not belong to people. It's helping someone else that you may never meet in your life, and you may never really know what the result of your help was. So the consumers are taking a bigger risk in a way in terms of result, and don't get anything that they can say, this belongs to me. But the thing that belongs to them is the feeling of helping, the feeling of contributing. But if I'm a consumer, I don't know, of Coca-Cola, for example, I don't feel like I really contribute to Coca-Cola apart from the financial, but I think I'm drinking a Coke because I like Coca-Cola and it's mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's the difference. So the way of working is and the impact that these different organizations are making. I think they have a lot to learn from each other. The private sector can learn a lot from the non-profit sector area in terms of emotion, and non-profit can learn a lot about the private sector in terms of structure, sharpness, and have more of a business mind as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now we see a lot of large organizations who are very business minded. So it's less, there's less difference. The branding has become very similar. They both integrate what was working in the other area. But there's still some differences in the way people are working, for example. In the public sector, it's public money. In the non-profit sector, it's money that they have to chase, and sometimes it's sponsorship and public money. And the private sector, if you don't work, you don't get. So it's a different way of approaching funding.
Right. Then I wanted to ask you, you've worked in all these different countries, and we're all aware of cultural differences between different countries, different parts of the world. Set aside the culture for a moment. Did you find major differences in attitude between different parts of the world, or not a lot?
Oh, yes. Well, I could start with France, for example, because I come from there. And when you live abroad, you realize more the strengths and weaknesses of your own culture.
Of course.
So the French, for example, tend to be very direct, like debates. It's part of the culture, and if you can have a good debate, it shows confidence. In some other cultures, having a debate means confrontation, conflict.
Yes. Right.
So you can see these differences. Then some cultures tend to be more apologetic. I found cultures where there's been several countries which have been colonized by several countries tend to be more curious, because in their history they had to be curious because they've seen a lot of cultures passing through. So I mean, I don't know about South Africa, but I can imagine that you've experienced this a little bit.
Oh yes, very much so, and but also a lot of similarities. That I found that successful people from wherever tend to have similar characteristics and attitudes. Doesn't matter where they come from, and people who don't really want to do much for themselves have similar attitudes and characteristics, no matter where they come from. Yeah, that is interesting. But I think I'm like you. I'm very grateful that I've had the experience of living and working in different parts of the world, because certainly opened your eyes to lots of things that other people don't get to experience. So that was good. Now, while I've got you again, stunning brand. When I looked at your website, you've got 4 senior people like yourself and 3 others, and with different areas of expertise. And the one lady, I think, is the mindfulness expert. So how does that fit into your branding strategy?
That's what a lot of people ask. Well, I believe to have a good brand, particularly for corporations, now the well-being of employees is important, because your biggest brand advocates are your employees. And mindfulness is something that a lot of companies are looking into, to help them focus, to help them being happier, to help them cope better with stress. And so that's why I incorporated mindfulness. I did a lot of sessions myself, And I found that it does help being also more creative, more efficient. And if you want a brand, because we're not actually really doing branding in terms of design, or we're doing more in terms of the inside and the energy the brand is passing on, and the emotion it's giving, and to give the positive, to make a positive impact. You know, like there are some sayings that the employees are actually the core of your company, and good leaders understand that, and understand that it is part of their branding as well, because the employees, if employees had are being taken care of, and they have sessions for their well-being, that looks very good for the company, but also employees speak about the company as an intelligent company, as a company who cares about them, and it all adds up.
Absolutely, yeah. Kathleen, back to you.
So Valerie, if somebody was interested in getting a hold of you, how do they do that? How do they connect with you?
So they can go to the website stunningbrand.com. There are 2 contact forms, one for corporation and one for entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, or people who just want personal branding. If they are not sure they want to fill the form, they can also contact me at hello@stunningbrand.com. And if they want to check me out, we have, I think, some reviews now on Trustpilot and Google reviews. So that's several ways of reaching out. And the phone number is on the website as well.
That's on there too. Okay. So you've answered what was going to be my next question, and that was going to be, what sort of businesses do you work with? And excuse me, so obviously you work with individuals who want to improve their personal brand, entrepreneurs, and corporations of what, any size, or?
Yeah, the size doesn't matter. The size of the workshops does matter, because if there's too many people, there's less focus. I've worked with tech companies mostly, and it's been really interesting because they tend to be very receptive. But we're open to any company. Like, for example, I think Orla has worked with large corporations. Paul tends to work with both. Dan works with very high-profile leaders. So we all have different strengths.
Different strengths, right?
Strengths, sorry, my English sometimes.
No, no, English is fine. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, are you seeing a pattern in how businesses, large or small, are overcoming the challenges as a result of this coronavirus lockdowns and all the stresses that are being put on businesses? Is there a common thread in the ones that are pivoting and becoming successful despite it?
I think everyone is more aware now of what something like COVID can do, and people are also aware of the future impact of climate change. So I think work from home is going to be happening more and more. And also they're implementing a lot more mental health programs as well, which is becoming necessary. In terms of branding, as most people think branding is in terms of marketing, and not much really. It's
not too much. But one of the big challenges for businesses that have always had all their employees in an office or in a factory or whatever, suddenly they have some of these companies have large numbers of people working from home that they don't see for maybe weeks at a time, except by Zoom. This must present some fairly major management challenges, I would guess.
It depends. Well, some tech companies are usually prepared, so doesn't seem to be too much of a problem. Of course, there's, depending on the country, in France, they tend to miss the contact a lot because French people like, that's why we have long lunches. And
Yes.
we like chatting. And I think in English-speaking countries, the work from home was already, in tech companies, was already happening quite a lot.
Sure, sure.
I have heard someone the other day saying that his employer is selling their building because they've realized that they've provided more results since people are working from home. So it really depends on the company.
Sure, sure. Interesting. Kathleen, we're running somewhat short of time. Back to you.
Yes, so I think we are out of time actually. So thank you so much, Valerie, for joining us today. We so appreciated having you on, and thank you all very much for joining us again. And again, we appreciate your comments, so do please keep them coming. And if anyone out there is interested in becoming a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself, and you would definitely make our day if you were to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So until next time, take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.